Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. If everyone wants to grab their seats, please. And if someone from the back could pull the doors closed, that would be lovely. Thank you. So, welcome to this session. This session is all about Tales from the Watershed. And just an FYI, I'm Hannah Bates, Program Assistant for the Water Center, so I'll be moderating and keeping everyone on time as much as possible this afternoon. Our first presenter will be Aaron Gwinnup. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Yep, perfect. Will be Aaron Gwinnup. And brief little info about him before he gets started. He is a licensed professional engineer specializing in sustainable stormwater management and ecological restoration. His specific areas of expertise are in design of urban stormwater best management practices, stream corridor assessment, and restoration of prairies, river, fluvial, nutrient fate, and transfer mechanics, and the agricultural impact of Midwestern flooding on the Gulf of Mexico dead zone. Before joining HR Green as a water resources engineer, Aaron owned and operated a design-build construction company in eastern Iowa for 9 years. So if you want to give him a hand and welcome him.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and also Derek Namanny is here with me today to help present all this. He's from IDALS, Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. He's been there for a few years now, and also urban conservationist. He is a technical advisor with the State Revolving Fund Sponsored Projects Program, which provided funding for this particular project. And so he and I have been working together on this from the beginning for several years now. And well, there we go. Just get it started. So what we're talking about is a project in Sioux City, Iowa, that started out as a fairly typical project. We did a floodplain analysis and looked at some stream bank failure problems that we'll go through. And in general, what we wanted to talk about today was just the fact that as engineers, we tend to approach these projects in a pretty systematic and, well, engineering sort of a way. And through working with Derek and as well a huge cast of project partners, I think the overall project and the various elements that all came together really ended up being a whole lot more than they otherwise would have, and so really have a lot of value to everything. So just a little bit of quick background. Sioux City, Iowa. You'd be amazed what you get when you search for a map of the United States. And but yes, ma'am. Okay. Is this better? Yes. Excellent. Move around a lot, so I don't want to go into too much, but thank you. Let me know if I wander away or start to mumble too much. Anyway, Sioux City, Woodbury County, Northwest Iowa. And so this is the reason that our phone rings. As an urban stream guy, this is the sort of thing we see fairly often. Like I said, we started this with a floodplain study, and then it moved on pretty quickly to some stream issues. It's pretty dramatic stream issues. I won't go into it too much. It's not really the point of what we're talking about today. But some of these, in particular in the middle, are 50, 60 foot cut banks and eroded bluffs. And so when we're talking about failing banks and bluff erosion and whatnot, we're talking dozens of tons of sediment contribution every time. So a little bit more advanced than your typical. But again, we'll kind of skip through some of that. That's not what I wanted. There we go. So there again, I'm not going to go into it too much, but again, this is the reason our phone rings. Big stream failure problems, and as you can see, there were failure points moving towards roads and houses, and they wanted us to take a peek at what's wrong with the stream and what do we do about it. And so, quick tour of the watershed. This is the Quick Creek watershed in Sioux City, Iowa, about 1.8 square miles. And Most of it's urban. Well, it's all within the city, but there are some park areas, some cemetery, and but it's all pretty much fully developed. And we'll pay a little bit of special attention to the southwestern corner of the watershed for this particular presentation. There's a park there, South Ravine Park. It's about 90 or 100 acres, something like that. And when we found it, there were some really cool little patches of native prairie and oak savanna, but it's pretty severely overgrown, and we'll get into that a little bit more here in a moment. So again, we started this all off with a floodplain study, and then it moved on pretty quickly to a stream stabilization project, just because of the dramatic extent of the erosion and the incision. Most of the streams 6, 12, even 18 feet in size, and so pretty serious. In that floodplain study, we found that even the 500-year floodplain was the exact same shape as the 1 year, because it was all within the same incised trench. It was pretty seriously dramatic. So I'm an engineer, and we tend to look for engineering sort of solutions to problems. We identified 7,800 linear feet of potential places we could put a rock toe, and blah, blah, blah. And all in all, pretty hard solutions. When I do a lot of stream work, I try to kind of dial it back a little bit and use a little bit more natural techniques. But just from a big picture concept sense, we identified a whole bunch of stuff we could do, and then looked for better options. So I want to flash back and forth a little bit here. When we first kicked this off, we met with the city and Derek and the funding source, and we just had an initial design kickoff meeting. And I'm not sure how they found out about it, but a few local neighbors, just general public, near the park found out about it and marched down to this meeting. And I'm pretty sure on the way to the meeting, they formed themselves as the Ravine Park Protection Association. No idea what we were planning on doing. They hadn't seen the report for the 7,800 linear feet of rock toe or anything like that. No idea. They were damn sure they didn't like it, whatever it was, and were not in favor of it. Partly, I think there had been another project somewhere else nearby, conducted by another government entity. It's probably not here. They cut down all the trees and they put up levees and blah, blah, blah. And they didn't want that. And honestly, they were not proposing that. But they showed up just mad, and they were not in favor of it. And the main thing they said was, do not cut down any trees, which we'll come back to that. These guys have been some of our best allies ever since then. I'm gonna, spoiler. So Derek introduced me to Mr. Chad Gravy, who was a great inspiration and partner on this project, and gave us some good insight. And he said something that I guess, obvious now, but it really kind of rings in my mind, and I remember it all the time, and I repeat it a lot. And we're looking at the stream and the problems, and he said, if you're trying to fix a stream and you're trying to fix it in the stream, you're doing it wrong and you're starting in the wrong place. And that really kind of inspired a lot of the rest of what we're about to talk about. As well, funding source, sponsored project program, has a mandate that anything you do has to be a watershed-based approach. You can't just go and dump some rocks in a stream bank and call that good. You have to work within the watershed to address hydrology issues as well. So with that said, Derek's going to talk a little bit about kind of how we got to where we're at now, and well, go ahead.
So yeah, once we kind of had an idea that we had to go up into the watershed and try to figure out what we can install in the watershed to slow a lot of this water down, we initially wanted to focus on the timber that was surrounding the stream bed that we were looking at fixing. So we noticed that as we made our way through this timber, just like any typical stand you see in Iowa, it's pretty overgrown with some oak trees coming up with a lot of scrub woody vegetation that's forming a dense canopy that's not letting any sunlight hit the forest floor. So in turn, nothing's growing. So as we were looking at this, and as we realized that there's a lot of oak trees in here, we started to wonder if there's maybe some sort of an opportunity for an oak savanna remnant or an oak savanna restoration here. So that's when we contacted Chad Gravy to come up and actually take a look at it. And he's worked on dozens of these in Pottawatomie County in the Lost Hills and around Council Bluffs. And basically, walked through it, and he said that we had an opportunity here as long as we were able to get our ducks in a row and be able to ensure that it can be maintained throughout the lifespan once we do it. So once we went in here, and I guess I should mention too, in Oak Savannah. Oak Savannah is basically a landscape that is dominated by prairie, but mixed in with the prairie are interspersed oak trees that are on there that allow that the oak trees are far enough spaced apart that they allow sunlight to hit through and then allow vegetation to grow in the forest for us. So we figured, okay, now that we got Chad's sign off that we had an opportunity here, we wanted to figure out a blueprint for how we would design this. So we spoke with Wayne Peterson, the state urban conservationist with Idolls, and he pointed us to a project that he worked on for many years down in Decatur County, just north of the Missouri border, called the Timber Hill Oak Savannah Restoration. And what this was, it was a couple that retired out of Des Moines and moved down to Decatur County and bought a few hundred acres, and throughout the course of burning annually for over 20 years, they were able to completely restore their ecosystem back from the typical overgrown forest that it was. So throughout the course of them doing this restoration, they documented everything, wrote a book, which you can actually find on Amazon if you Google Timber Hill Oak Savannah, and they maintained a website on here that basically acts like a blog or a journal that they go in and maintain or update all of their the tasks that they do. So as you can see, just all the stuff that they've done, and with all the everything they've been able to document for the species coming back, it's they arguably are saying one of the most biologically diverse place in Iowa. So now that we had our blueprint and for figuring out what we wanted to do, we wanted to get all the partners on board. So that's when, like when Aaron mentioned, that we probably throughout the course of 6 months to a year contacted all of these agencies and all of these folks to get input on how to do it, where to do it, what time to do it, and then also just as important, the maintenance aspect of it, making sure that we had all the partners on board that once we do this, that we don't just walk away from it and let it turn back to what it was. So again, having all these partners on board was probably the most key thing for this project. And also in the course of that, a few local residents actually went in and did a species inventory of the site before we did any restoration efforts, which was kind of something that we didn't think about, but it was, again, a great tool that we can kind of compare and contrast like they did at that Timber Hill Oak Savannah restoration. Let's see here. So now that we had all of our partners on board, we wanted to get some sort of evidence of what this looked like or if this was in fact an Oak Savannah ecosystem. Just because, when we're talking with a lot of folks, we can claim till we're blue in the face that this is what it looked like before, but unless you have some historical documentation or photographs to back it up, it can sometimes be a hard case to make. So we're able to track down some historical literature that basically states, due to the suppressing of fire from European settlement, all of our oak savannas are starting to fill in with a lot more scrub, woody vegetation, and shading out all the native vegetation that was there. And then Diane Blankenship, who was listed as one of the people that helped with that species inventory, was actually able to track down a couple of photographs for us, which proved to be completely awesome for this project. And this is standing at the Sergeant Floyd's Monument looking south, when you can see the ridges of this of Ravine Park in the background. You can see there's not a lot of trees along that ridge top. And then she was able to track down a postcard for us, and there's Sergeant Floyd's Monument right up here again. Again, shows the ridge top of this almost completely void of trees, but then as you start to work your way closer to that creek, you get a few oak trees mixed in there. So take that and compare it to the view of the park today. We knew that basically, this is our key pieces of evidence to getting forward to making sure, okay, now we've got everything to make. So now that we have the plan in place, now that we have the partners on board, and now that we know what we want to do, basically to the climax of everything, we had to hold the public meeting for it. And so Aaron, I'm just maybe get a point to jump in.
Yeah, you bet. So it was really cool to work with all those people. I mean, I consider myself a novice prairie hugger, but it was really neat to work with all those people that had all the different viewpoints on specific methodology of eliminating invasive species and what to do when and what order. But they, really revolved around the fact that there really was some good native remnant patches up on top of the hill that were kind of isolated, partly because if you're familiar with Lost Hills, they tend to be really steep, really fragile ecosystems. There's places up there that people just couldn't even really get to very easily with especially older agriculture equipment, and then town encroached, and so you lose the big foraging herbivores, and then you have fire suppression, and so it gets all overgrown. And so they said, well, Oak Savannah prairie restoration. cut down a whole bunch of the trees and then burn it regularly. And and so, remember, we had these guys that said, don't cut down a single tree. And we were just talking about the stream then. We weren't even talking about the major part of the rest of the park. So we showed up, Wayne and some folks from SRF and Derek, and we were kind of loaded for bear, like, God, they're gonna roast us before this is over. And it was, you know, it was a little tense at first, but pretty quickly it came around pretty well. And there were some folks there as well from the Audubon Society and Sierra Club that I think got it, and they kind of helped spread the word, including Ed Sibley, who was the leader of that Ravine Park Protection Association. As I'm kind of working the crowd at the public meeting, I look over and he's sitting there with Wayne, and they're looking through the Timber Hill book, and they just seemed to be getting along real well. And by the time the meeting was done, oh yeah, by the Derek was like, we got to find some kind of kumbaya slide or something. By the time the meeting was done, it really was this amazing sort of a thing where everybody was just kind of sitting around, and Ed Sibley just kind of went on this rant about, you know, how great this is and how wonderful an opportunity, and it really went from being a, man, they're going to roast us alive to this really seems to be going somewhere pretty well. We actually did have another second public meeting, just by contract we were set up to do that, and by that one we were actually invited to the local Audubon Society annual meeting, and we just gave it there, and it was very warmly received, and so yeah, so off and running. So step back for 1 second. So we needed a watershed-based approach. The city still had some pretty obvious, pretty gnarly stream problems that they wanted to solve. And so we put together a 3-phase set of solutions for them. Phase 1 is basically the park restoration. And again, a big part of that is not just the ecological elements, but there's actually a hydrologic driver for it too. The invasive, shallow-rooted overgrowth, the matted leaves from no fire and whatnot, tends to create a surface that's almost as impervious as pavement itself. And so there was a lot more runoff from the park directly to the stream than there otherwise should have been, based on comparing to a native landscape. And so locally, just in the park itself, that ecosystem restoration is designed to, you know, reduce the runoff and help the stream. We still have the stream issues to deal with, and so over the last couple of years, we've been doing a bit of stream work. If we have time left, we'll show you a few pictures of that. And then phase 3 was moving all the way up to the top of the hill to a commercial area in the watershed, where a lot of the really concentrated, really flashy runoff was coming from. Looking at like 2,000% increase in runoff pre-development versus post-development, and so creating a lot of that nasty, you know, 12-foot deep incision in the stream. And each one of those phases, I should say, had some level of really kind of reaching out and working with the various group of partners. It was really the Oak Savannah Prairie Restoration that had a huge group of contributors, and so that's kind of, yeah, I focused on that. But so we just have a few pictures of that restoration work for phase 1 of phase 1, if you will. We worked with the Conservation Corps of Iowa, which was really fun. It was pretty much 17 young aspiring ecologists with chainsaws that showed up and made quick work of 6 or 7 acres in about 4 days. And that was a lot of fun. It's a little hard to visualize, but you can kind of see in these before and afters going from a lot of scrubby undergrowth to a bit more clear. You can start to see a bit more definition on some of the bigger oak trees. We left some of the oak trees that you might want to, we left some of the trees that you otherwise might want to clear. One of the bits of advice we received from some of the project partners, you don't want to clear everything right away because the big old wolf trees, they call them, can get a bit atrophied, and so maybe not quite so resistant to wind forces and whatnot. So if you get rid of everything and you get a few big storms, sometimes those big trees you want to keep get knocked down. And so we left a few that in later successions they could come back and clear.
I think they told us to limb everything too, to make sure it touched the forest floor, right? Yeah. So make sure to limb everything so that it has contact with the forest floor, so the decomposition rates speed up, so it doesn't hang out as long.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just a few more views. There's a pretty nice trail system that runs through the park. And so a lot of what the Conservation Corps focused on was clearing closest to the trail system, so the public could get a good appreciation for what it's going to look like. And I think that was the site of one of the largest Russian olive trees I've ever seen in my life. They said they went through 4 cans of gas and a chainsaw just to get it down on the ground. It was huge. So next summer, I think you took these, didn't you?
I think.
These. Next summer, we haven't even burned anything yet. This is just kind of waiting for the felled wood to dry a little bit. And already you can, I mean, you got some prairie phlox there coming up, and you can just see that this is the corridor that's clean. None of that's going on over in the dense stuff, and you can just almost hear the ecosystem just breathing a sigh of relief and just trying to come back out. I was really excited to see that. And so it's a little bit, right after they were done, it's a little bit scorched earth. I mean, it's kind of brutal if you're used to walking through there and seeing a green park to see a bunch of trees just knocked down. I'll just really kind of quickly blitz through. Phase 2 is some of the stream stabilization work. There again, excellent partnerships that contributed to this. We worked with John Thomas, Hungry Canyons Alliance, Nate Hogeveen, DNR Rivers Program, as well as Derek and a number of the other folks we already mentioned, all kind of contributed to honing down that big picture plan from 7,800 linear feet of rocks to a little bit softer, more natural techniques. One of the more fun ones that we used it's kind of a dereliction of Rosgen Type 3 toewood sod mat. Instead of just using a bunch of rocks, we used a bunch of the oak trees that had fallen into the stream from the failing banks, limbed them up, used those as the toe reinforcement, and then put, in true toewood sod, you transplant some of the native sod material from a point bar on top of the logs to build up a small floodplain bench along the outside of a bend. So again, we've got these 50, 60 foot cut banks, and every time a flood comes up, tickles the bottom of those banks, you get these mass wasting events where a progression of bluff failure progresses up. And so we wanted to move the thawweg of the stream out away from the toe of that and protect it. So we built it out about 20 feet using this method. There again, when we first ran this through some of our engineering reviewers, they started saying, well, it's wood, it's going to float. We're not using rocks, we gotta cable it down. They had all these cables in there and all these extra things, and between John and Nate, they were like, just tell them, trust us. You don't need all the metal stuff, and use the stream parks and in the stream, no metal things. And so we whittled it back. This is the design we ended up with. We've used versions of this elsewhere, but this is kind of a combination. Anyway, toe logs right at the edge. Yeah, they're kind of shingled in succession. Drove some piles in front of those to hold them in place. These are the actual revetment logs that we'll build up on top of. It's a little hard to tell because it's such tight confines, but the new stream thawweg will be out here in front of that face. This was just completed about 3 weeks ago, by the way, so I'd love to show you pictures with the vegetation complete, but it ain't there yet. We built some fabric encapsulated soil lifts on top of that because there wasn't a whole lot of native vegetation to build those sod layers with. Some people call them dirt burritos. It's all natural fiber, and transplant some of the point bar soil so as to move the stream in a little bit to that. Roll them up, put native seeding in it, plug them with some bare root plants, and that's essentially what it looks like before anything grows and before they do the finish grading that they probably are doing right now. Again, a little bit hard to tell because you're in a a 12-foot in size channel with a 50-foot bank, and I need to get a drone or something so we can get some aerial views of that. I'm still working on qualifying that expenditure, but we're getting there. So phase 3 is it's fully designed, but they're going to build it this year. Basically, big old mall, top of the watershed. We're going to pretty much fill this entire vacant lot with a huge bioretention cell, put another one here, and take out a bunch of the kind of nasty pine tree vegetation islands and fill them with some native pollinator gardens and amended soil and whatnot. Perfect. And with that, take any questions.
Based on your last slide there, your comments, I'm guessing if you would put some feelers out, you would find a farmer somewhere that was got a drone that would be just tickled to death to fly that bird.
Fantastic. That sounds good. We take it. That really is the only way to try and get a good view. I've tried to go up on top of that bluff a few times to take pictures, but I can't bring myself to get right out there. Yeah, it's a little too steep. Yes, sir.
Can you speak to the cost of this and where the funding came from?
Yep. The funding.
Both for the stream and for the commercial runoff reduction project?
Yep. Almost all of the funding came from the State Revolving Fund Sponsored Projects Program. And the city, of course, floats that in the interim, but they'll get reimbursed for it. Costs, good question. They started out with a $1.5 million, it's not a grant, but it's close to a grant, budget. And we're kind of in the middle of a little bit of a funding hiccup. That particular grant got diminished, but then they got another one subsequently, and so that's been kind of refilled. Roughly speaking, Oak Savannah and Prairie restoration is cheap. It's really pretty cheap. I mean, we've only done a single phase of it, and they've spent maybe $20,000, $30,000, something like that. And again, we've only really done 6 or 7 acres. As I understand, the city plans to expand that out and do considerably many more times that. The stream work is something like $300,000 or $400,000. What we showed was just 1 or 2 little areas. There's a couple dozen areas in total. The upland BMPs at the mall is probably something like, I think our current bid for the contractor stuff starts $400 and some thousand. Again, that's a couple of huge bioretention cells and then some native landscaping. So, plus it's on a mall site, so it's a little bit pricier than usual. But, yes, sir.
Can you speak to working with the city and the fire department, what it takes to sell a community on wildfires are a good thing?
Yeah, that's a whole other twist. Definitely there was a lot of hesitation at first. I think there were some comments, something like, over my dead body. Will we be burning within city limits? But as we started to talk about it more and get more details, it definitely warmed up quite a bit. That said, they haven't actually done it yet. It's a little bit overdue, but as we get things kind of going with this next phase, things are essentially lined up to do that. It has been done before. Woodbury County Conservation has burned some of their own properties within city limits. They have a permitting process that you work with the fire marshal to establish that. Scott Motes with the Nature Conservancy, another one of our project partners, has worked with the city. He's a burn plan reviewer, and so it's a serious process. You've got to have a solid burn plan. You've got to submit it to them in advance for review. They've got to approve it. Ed Sibley, again, our local friend, has really kept everybody's feet to the fire. He even just volunteered and wrote a draft burn plan that's pretty much ready to go. The city intends to hire a burn contractor to actually execute it. Believe it or not, it's hard to find somebody that has found insurance to set things on fire. And so that's one of the big hiccups. There's only a few folks that do that, but there are some specialty contractors here and there. And so that's a big part of it. And we've been mentioning a lot of names, but as well, Melissa Campbell from City of Sioux City has really been the driving force behind a lot of this, and she's the keeper of the flame and deserves a lot of kudos on that front.
So
Yes.
we're at our time actually, but we've got 10 minutes before the next session starts. If you want to come up and ask questions individually.
Can we just get one more?
And I really can't. We have tight schedules today, I'm sorry, but
You know
certainly
where to
come
find
up.
me.